up your engine! All right, a lot of people are asking, Scotty, why did you move from Houston, Texas to Tennessee? Well, there were a lot of reasons behind it. Some of it was just pure. I didn't like the way that Houston was going. My neighborhood was becoming totally gentrified with everyone driving around in Porsches. I'll never forget when I was walking down the street with my wife and I saw a guy up in a brand new townhome and I looked down and in front was a nice old Ford pickup truck from the 70s. And I said, hey, it's great to see somebody moving in here that isn't driving a Porsche. And he looked down and he laughed and he said, yeah, well, my partner, he's got a Porsche in the garage. The door was closed, so I couldn't see inside. I didn't like the tax setup. I was paying twice in tax every year that I had paid for my original mortgage on the house. So I didn't like that either. And I really got to say I like Tennessee. People are really friendly here. It's more wide open. The tax situation is less than in the big city of Houston. Both states don't have income taxes, so I'm happy there. And it was just time for a change. When you live somewhere for 40 plus years, you know, you've done everything there is to do there. And hey, there's a better football team here in Tennessee after the world's worst coach in Houston, and then they promoted the world's second worst coach to coach now, which obviously isn't going to last long. I got to say I'm pretty happy here, and everyone here's been really friendly to me. Tennessee's a volunteer state, and people do tend to volunteer a lot more here. There's no arguing that. And I got to say, well, it was time for a change. I was being more like a tree with roots stuck in the ground. I've been uprooted, but I'm starting to root down here now in Tennessee. Here we go. We got a real scam going on here. Nissan is going to be offering free RAV4 test drives to prove that their Nissan Rogue is better. To me, this is just a con job. I've been working on cars for 53 years. The RAV4s and the Nissan Rogues do not last nearly as long as the RAV4s. They have nowhere near the quality. And the price isn't all that much different. The Rogue is $25,600. The RAV4 is $26,000. Not that much difference. If you're talking about something that can last forever versus something that will fall apart as it ages, you can't compare the RAV4 to a Rogue. Now, supposedly they're going to be getting RAV4s and put them on a lot, right, to compare them with the Rogues. You can road test them one and then the other. Well, who's to say what kind of shape they're going to have those leased or rented RAV4s, and, you know, maybe they'll let air out of the tires. Who knows what they would do? This is just a publicity stunt, you know. Toyota laughed and said, great, let them compare. But who's to say they're going to do it equally? They're probably going to end up going out and do something to the RAV4s or drive them over big potholes to make the suspensions all bent and worn out. I certainly wouldn't trust them. The idea that they're going to say, oh, try the RAV4 and then try ours and compare them, it's just plain craziness. It's just another gimmick, sales gimmick. Nissan is so hard up trying to get sales because their sales are down that I guess they'll do anything. I love to see how this is actually going to play out, how many dealers will actually do it, and how they're going to take care of the RAV4s to compare them. And maybe they'll have the base RAV4 compared to the, you know, top of the line that's got everything on it. Who knows? All I know is if you value your money, you'd be a fool to buy a Rogue versus a RAV4. Since you're only going to pay $500 more for the RAV4 at a base level, it would just be insanity to even think about it. Here's some more electric car news. Ford is going to invest $100 million in a Missouri plant to produce an all-electric van. They've got the transit vans. Well, they're going to make all-electric transit vans in Missouri. So they're serious about it. They understand, hey, electric vans could be the thing of the future. Why not do things that are big and carry things first where electric motors are at the forefront? In my grandfather's day, he worked on electric trucks at the shredded wheat factory in Niagara Falls. They had electric trucks even back then. The electric and trucks and moving stuff, being able to pull weight, it's actually one of their best formats for electricity, pulling stuff. A lot of torque. You don't necessarily need insane horsepower. You need torque to pull things around. Now, through 2022, Ford is spending $11.5 billion on electric car and truck products. And that includes investing $1.35 million in the Oakville, Ontario complex. I had a Ford Maverick that was built in Oakville, Ontario a million years ago. It was a 1970 Maverick. Canadians know how to make stuff. Ford is planning this electrification all over the place. They're serious about it. And, I mean, if one thing you look at Fords, they always had decent electrical systems. They aren't like GMs and Chryslers that had horrible electric problems, or the mass insanity that Fiat's had throughout their history with electrical problems. Building electric cars for them, hey, they're putting a lot of money into it, and they see, hey, this is something that the future's going to be, and they're not just talking. They're putting their money where their mouth is. So, $11.5 billion, a lot of money put into electric cars. They're planning for the future. Mix41 says, I got a 2013 Camry with 80,000 miles. When should I change the coolant? You should change it now. The Toyota coolant is a very good coolant. They use what's called a HOT coolant, which stands for Hybrid Organic Acid Technology. Buy a HOT coolant and change it now, because it's generally good for 7 years or over 100,000 miles. Some of them say 150,000 miles, but really 100,000 miles is a long way, and it's not that hard to change. I would change it out now with the HOT coolant, and then you wouldn't have to think about it for another 7 years or 80 or 100,000 miles. It's time and miles, and even though you don't have 100,000 miles on it, you gone 7 years, so you might as well change it now. Coolant is cheap. Engines and water pumps are not. So, with that HOT coolant, you don't have to change it that often, maybe every 7 years, 100,000 miles. Do it now, and then you don't have to think about it for a long time. Susveri said, hello, would an Audi A6 2001-4 with about 130,000 miles be a decent beater car for under $2,000? Is it reliable enough to drive for a few years? Audis are common here in Northern Europe. We are Northern Europe. There's probably guys that know how to fix them, and they're reasonable about it. You might take a chance. Here in the United States, there are endless money pits, and the parts cost a small fortune. I'll give you an example with my own experience. I was working on a guy's Audi years ago. I went to the Audi dealer in my garage shirt and garage pants, right? And I was ignored by everyone because all the people working there had three-piece suits on, and they were kissing the heinies of people who were coming in to either buy Audis or have their Audis serviced, and they treated me like absolute scum. And if you're not one of their clients that they're taking money from, they're not the nicest people here in the United States. Now, in Europe, from what I read, it's a better situation where there are guys aftermarket that know how to fix them, and they can fix them correctly. Just like ages ago in the United States when Volkswagen Beetles were in fashion. There were a lot of guys who worked on Beetles, and you didn't have to go to the dealer and get ripped off. There were a lot of guys that worked on Volkswagens. You could get parts cheap when they were the old simple air-cooled Beetles. So it wasn't a bad idea to buy them. But today, take Volkswagen in the United States. They're high-tech. They own Porsche. They own Audi. And you go to a Volkswagen dealer, they're going to charge you a fortune to get your car worked on, too. So maybe in Europe, maybe not such a bad idea if you know a mechanic that knows how to fix those things that isn't going to take you to the cleaners every time you bring that Audi in. RDE Vanny 327 says, my mom's car, '03 Sable. The driver's side door went open from the outside, but it opens from the inside. Could I try to fix it? Well, if you're competent with taking the door inner panel off, you can watch my video, how to remove a panel on a door, Scotty, and you'll see it's not all that hard to take it apart. When you go inside, it could be as simple as when you open the door, there's little clips that it pulls up. Sometimes those clips fall out and the rod comes out. Could be that simple. Or you might need a new door handle assembly. A lot of this stuff's plastic. The plastic stuff will break and it won't work anymore. You can easily get those door handles aftermarket that don't cost all that much. And if you got some normal hand tools, you can take it apart and put it back together again. It's not rocket science. And like I say, sometimes the pieces just fall off. Though from my experience, it's an '03. Odds are the handle itself is broken because there's so much plastic junk that the lever part that picks up inside, often that plastic clip breaks off and it's broken, and then you just got to buy a new door handle. Like I said, they're not all that expensive, and you can get them at just about any place. Or if you're worried, buy one ahead of time on Amazon, have it shipped to your house so you have a spare door handle for the driver's side, and then put it in yourself. It's not that big of a deal, really. Justice asks, my brake pedal goes down when I slowly press it. If I hit it hard, it doesn't, and I don't see any leaks anywhere. What could it be? All right. Here's a very good test that works quite well for almost all brake problems. Of course, you look to see if there's leaks. If it's leaking anywhere, if the wheels are wet, you got to fix that. The lines are leaking, you got to fix that. If you're adding fluid, you know it's leaking, you got to fix the leak. But if it's not leaking, you're not adding any fluid. Here's a really good test. First thing you want to do is have the car turned off. Step on the brake pedal. If the brake pedal is hard, then start the car. And then if you step on the brake pedal and it starts sinking, brake booster. Your brake booster has a problem. Because once you start the car, the booster's getting the boost. And if it starts sinking, it means the booster is bad. Now, if it sinks all the time, whether the car's turned on or turned off, more often, if you're not adding fluid, it's the brake master cylinder. Because what a brake master cylinder can do is, when it goes bad, it will sink, but you won't lose fluid because it's leaking inside itself. It's like a heart murmur in a person. When you got a heart murmur, your heart is leaking inside, the valves are leaking a little bit, but it's not leaking outside your body. And it's the same thing with a master cylinder. When you step on it, if it's bad inside, it leaks inside itself, and you don't lose any fluid because it's not coming out anywhere. But it will make the pedal sink. So do that test with the engine turned off and on, and you get a pretty good idea what the problem is. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.